there is, and we believe India will be an assisted, economy for the next 20 years at least. There is no way we can build an app and expect the rural part of the country to use it by themselves, and therefore we believe we have to invest in these women Hakdarshaks. That's our model really, right? So there is a technology, and there are a set of people whom we have trained on the ground to go do this work, right? So that's what we do. How do we do it? I'll just cover the work so far. About 4 million citizens that we have reached out to and serviced in the last 7.5 years. Present have done work in about 26 states, present in about 22 states today, and about close to now 5,000 crores of benefit that we have unlocked in terms of potential. So how do we do it? There is a team that we have employed, who are employees of Hakdarshak, who mobilize these women entrepreneurs on the ground, train them, and there are funders who come in and who, we are largely a service delivery organization, right? So we have to, work within the ambit of that contract, which says deliver so many scheme linkages in this part of the country. Sometimes we'll go to the extent of saying do only these scheme linkages. That depends on the organization who's funding it. And, actually do the work on the ground. So constant hand-holding of these women Hakdarshaks. They are probably women who are coming out to work for the first time, trying to earn a livelihood for themselves. Some of them don't even know how to use a smartphone. Some of them won't even have a smartphone. So, it starts there. The journey starts there of, getting them that access and training them how to use a smartphone, training them how to use the app, then training them on the schemes itself, training them how to talk to the citizen, how to go talk to a government officer, how to do that liaising. All of that bit happens. And then this team of team of women Hakdarshaks are out on the ground, largely from the community. Community model is what works here, right? Because trust is a major factor here. So they are out there mobilizing citizens either through door or through, conducting camps, engaging with the Pradhan, ensuring there are a group of people who are meeting together to get these services and so on and so forth. That's how the work happens on the ground, right? That's what we've sort of mastered partly, over the last 7 years, because we know how to do service delivery now. We know how to hit the ground running in about 2 weeks. It takes us 2 weeks to start a greenfield operation, right? That's the level of mastery on the process of service delivery. But what does data do here, right? What's the role of data here? Data comes in handy in the current, mode of working. Data comes in about 4-5 aspects, right? One is the actual mobilization itself. Sometimes, we work with SRLM, we work with NRLM. They have, data of SHG women. They have data of entrepreneurs whom they want serviced. Sometimes the government itself, the MSME department today is coming and telling us, I'll give you data of MSME, of artisans. Can you do Vishwakarma scheme for them, which is the in thing in the country now, right? So there is data. And people are now beginning to come up and say, I'll give you the data, can you use it to do service delivery? That is, we're beginning to see in the last 1-2 years, the use of data to actually sort of speed in that service delivery, right? Our own data comes in handy because we ourselves have about 4 million, citizens' data on our database. So, if we have to go back to a location and service, as a part of the same project or a part of the, or a new intervention, there is existing data with us which we can use through technology and through feet on the street to, understand what have they already got, what more can I give, and how do I reach them. That's another place where data comes in handy. Data comes in handy, obviously, for operational efficiency, right? To do things at this scale, like Megha was talking about M&E and, efficiency. And we have to talk all of these things, right? Being a for-profit service delivery. So we have to talk all these things. And data comes in handy big time. So at Hakdarshak, one of my biggest KRA is to ensure that it's not just the M&E team that looks at data. The service delivery team has to look at data to see, how they're performing and whether they're performing the right things and so on and so forth. Data comes in handy there. So these are some of the places where, we use data today to drive our operations and business, right? Taking it one step further, how do we make this more, sort of scalable and efficient is what I was talking about in terms of how do we, how do we think of the future here, right? So today, like I said, we are solving the problem of awareness and we are solving the problem of accessibility, right? Can I convert those two problems into the problem of discoverability and eligibility? That's the sort of journey that we want to make here, right? And as a vision, like I said, Hakdarshak has covered about 4 million citizens. We've reached out to about 4 million citizens across the country. The vision is to reach 100 million because, as we say, 4 million in a country like India is a pilot. What we've done is a pilot, right? So we'll have to reach 100 million. How do we reach 100 million? We are very, very sure we can't do it the way we are doing it today. We need to deploy data to get to the 100 million. We are very clear of that, right? And that's why converting the problem of awareness to discoverability and converting the problem of accessibility to eligibility, right? And how can we use data for that? Let me explain. Today, what do I mean by discoverability, right? Instead of the Hakdarshak going out and talking to a citizen on a door-to-door basis or conducting camps in a small way in the community, can we flip the problem and say, can the citizen, get a message or a notification saying, I may be eligible for this scheme, right? Maybe this is out there for me to use. How do we get there, right? Can I use the existing, let's say, the health database, right? Digital Health ID has been big in the country for the last couple of years. And we ourselves have done lakhs and lakhs of Digital Health ID registrations. Can we use, Digital Health ID to discover citizens who may be eligible for insurance, let's say, right? Can I use a revenue department database to see, are there citizens out there whose family, someone in the family is eligible for a scholarship? Can I use, is there a school database out there that I can use for RTE, for instance, right? So rather than that, personalized interaction between the Hakdarshak, the women entrepreneur, and the citizen, can we create demand? I'm going to use the word demand here, right? Can we flip the problem and say, can I create demand using data, using these databases, and actually, create that? That's why I said awareness has become discoverability, right? So it's like today we get a notification from a bank, let's say HDFC Bank, right? And they say, hey, you are eligible for a personalized loan of up to this much, or something like that. We get a message, right? Then that's what they're doing is discovering. If you actually walk into the branch, then they'll say, oh, for you, it's actually this much at this rate, right? It sort of becomes more specific and more, more personalized for you. So that's what I mean by discoverability, right? Can we create that, plumbing system? The plumbing system of, actually getting that message out there to largely eligible, citizens who may be eligible but not accurate still not accurate, right? That's the problem of discoverability that can be solved with current databases, and we actually believe the government is moving towards that direction. So if you look at the, investments that the governments are doing today in creating family IDs, right? For example, Karnataka has Kudumba ID. UP government now has a family ID, UP family ID. Madhya Pradesh has Samagra ID. So the government also is thinking like this, is what we believe, right? That you can capture the family and start discovering who is eligible for what by themselves. So you can route that benefit better, right? That's what we call as a problem of discoverability. What is the problem of eligibility, right? Now I've discovered, but it's still not accurate, right? I still don't know exactly whether this citizen is indeed eligible for, and do they have all the documentation that is required? Because documentation is still a big problem in this country, right? There'll be, unless you have the basic 5 sets of documents, Aadhaar, which is seeded to a phone number and a bank account, and income certificate, caste certificate, largely, and further for disability, ID and all that. Unless these 4-5 documents are in place, largely nobody will get schemes in this country. That's how the schemes are designed, right? So how do these databases then talk to each other to can we automate eligibility and base it on consent? Let me explain this, right? So if there is for example, there's a scheme called Sukanya, no, let me pick up, Janani Suraksha, which is a scheme for pregnant women, right? Institutionalizing delivery and ensuring that, she gets the benefit that she needs to get during that process. So is there a way today? How does it happen? The Asha worker in that village should know that this woman is pregnant. She has a system in which data has to be updated about this woman, and then the cash is actually handed over to the Asha worker, and she then has to, give it to the woman, who can then use it in the hospital and so on and so forth, right? This is how, Janani Suraksha works today. Can we move it? Can we flip it and say that there is a digital database, because she already has a digital health ID, that she is pregnant is captured in that, let's say, right? This is not there in the country today. We are just imagining that this could happen like this and how data can become powerful. So the system now knows that she's eligible. If this system is talking to the other systems through what is called an account aggregator framework, right? If this system is talking to other systems and you are actually able to say, oh, she does have, because the actual scheme is slightly different for different parts of the country. High performing states, low performing states, there are these variations, and then there is a scheduled caste variation and all of that stuff. So if all that information is fetched about that woman, can we send her an SMS or a message in whatever format and say, you are eligible for this scheme now, all I need is your consent. I will automatically send the money to your account, right? Eliminating all middlemen, eliminating all the other checks and balances that have to happen, right? If this can happen, then we have solved for the problem of eligibility also. In fact, automatic enrollment, right? This is where, like I said, futuristic, but can it happen? It can actually happen. And are there groups in the country working on this? There are groups in the country that are working on this, right? Some of them are sitting on the table here. So I think that is where Haqdarshak is looking at, how are we using data today, and how do we use data? How can data be used? Discoverability is still happening. We are involved in projects where we are discovering girl children in UP for a scheme called Sukanya Samriddhi, right? The government has validated everything using their databases and giving the data to us, saying, go now, just do Sukanya Samriddhi. I know they are eligible. I know they have all the documents, right? So that is already happening. So it has to happen at scale, and it has to happen across ministries and across schemes. Eligibility is still not happening. That is still sort of work in progress, but that's where we can go with data. What does this do? If you are able to build systems for this, that is the path from 4 million to 100 million. Because, we believe we can't do this by themselves. There needs to be collaboration. There needs to be multiple players to reach the 100 million. And if you build systems for this, if you're solving for discoverability and eligibility rather than awareness and accessibility, I think more players will play this game. Efficiency will improve. They will honestly be... The Haqdarshak is earning more now, right? The woman entrepreneur on the ground, she doesn't have to go and do the basic documentation. She doesn't have to, it's a hit. It's not a hit or a miss. It's a definite hit if she has this data, right? So she's able to do more. She's able to earn more, better livelihood, and therefore she will better retention. Still assisted. But still, the system has become much more efficient. So this is what data can do in terms of scale, efficiency, productivity, and all of that stuff. And I believe that's where sort of, Haqdarshak wants to go over and above what we are currently doing today. I'll sort of pause here, leave the thoughts with you, and maybe take questions later.
Thanks so much, Gayathri. I think just two things from what you said. I think one, sort of the futuristic perspective, and I think that's something I want to highlight, that I think as organizations, all of your data systems as well as data use cases are not going to be things that you're going to have as you start, right? This is a journey, and just also hearing about how Darshak is thinking about use cases, thinking about how data is useful for scale. And I think the second point is, a lot of times we're looking at, typically like collecting data from, the clients that we are servicing, and how a lot of times it's looked at in terms of primary data collection to get information on the outcomes, but just the sheer power and potential of administrative data, of government databases. I think that's something that's really immense. Thanks. So I'll hand it over to Madhu now from Pradhan. So Madhu's recognized for her pioneering work on gender equality through women collectives, focusing on women's understanding of gender in their everyday lives. She has been responsible for setting up Pradhan's online MIS, which is an end-to-end system of collecting field data directly from communities. And we'd love to hear more about that as part of your session. Thanks, Madhu.
Good morning, everyone, and happy to be here to share our experience of, I wouldn't say we've kind of, arrived or have done, but really, I think it's just the beginning of, setting up an endeavor in this direction of a more informed decision making based on data. So, so just to, give you a brief background about Pradhan, we are like a 40 plus years organization. And for much of our organizational life, we believe that improving people's livelihoods was the key to bringing about, change in rural context. And therefore, we've kind of focused on, enhancing livelihoods through a variety of, strategies. I'll not go into that, but typically, the issue is that in livelihoods, the pipeline, unlike, for example, an entitlement pipeline, tends to be a shorter pipeline, maybe, but a livelihoods pipeline, is a long pipeline. On top of that, we kind of, over a period of time, also realize the limitation of focusing only on a predominantly economic paradigm of development, in the sense of, that it leaves out many of the, people who are poorest. It kind of may perpetuate deeply embedded beliefs around, say, gender, caste, class, etc. And also that, livelihoods, one part of it is the private action that I, as an individual, do on my, using my private resources. But much of my economic well-being and social well-being also depends on my interaction with public systems around me, and how much of a, claim making, etc., that I do, and interaction that I do with public systems around me as a citizen and not really as a beneficiary. So those also have, got added as additional, not overlays, but, kind of integrated into the development approach. And also, several other things related to behavior change. For example, we realize that food availability may not always be equivalent to, may not always translate into nutrition security. So therefore, there is a need to actually work on specific, behavior change kind of things also. So just to, basically lay out before you the complexity of the theory of change, which over a period of time, kind of translated into a broader approach of economic at the core, but social and political empowerment also integrated into the entire development paradigm. And plus, of course, the kind of scale that Pradhan works at, which is kind of, close to 40 districts and around 104 odd blocks, etc., across these 7 states. I'll show you, Mane, please don't get scared. I mean, I will not even attempt to delve into this is the current theory of change. So what I shared was, kind of the approach that we followed through engaging direct on the ground footprint. Huh? So we had Pradhan teams directly operating on the ground and engaging with rural communities. Now, on top of that, we kind of realized the imperatives of our own aspiration, ambitions, plus also, the changing context and expectations from different stakeholders like the government as well as donors, which said that, scale was increasingly becoming an imperative. So if you see in the theory of change, we are saying that, the top rectangular kind of a thing says, the primacy remains around, livelihoods supplemented by, gender, nutrition, ecological sustainability, which Pradhan has always kind of held very important in its scheme of things. But if you see in terms of, how this change will happen, we are saying that change will happen not only through our own presence on the ground, which can only be limited, as we also heard Saurabh Garg speak in the plenary session in the morning. But change can happen through an active collaboration between civil society and the government systems, and also private sector. So just to tell you the complexity of the measurement process that therefore it entails. Um, yeah. So, uh, so therefore, the kind of, just to, lay out before you the kind of challenges that we had, that essentially, we kind of expected, as like any other civil society organization, resources are kind of, always in short supply, and people on the ground are limited, and therefore, we kind of depended upon a system where professionals or actors who were involved in the implementation, in the activities, were kind of also responsible for collecting the data related to, activities and action and outputs and those kinds of things. There were several challenges related to this, as I'm guessing, all of you who are involved in the social sector would have encountered these issues. That, one is the kind of, every team will think that, data, that their conception of, how data needs to be collected would be different, and so therefore, it's very difficult to arrive at one particular template. For example, how does one measure the health of a self-help group? Huh? So everyone will have their own kind of, perspective associated with it, and things like that. Measuring incomes is always very, very complex, and gender is even more so. So things like that, arriving at a one uniform methodology, but also arriving at sampling, which is such a core, scientific basis of, actually arriving this. And the other thing is that because of the longer pipeline, you kind of are involved in the initial bits of, actually being able to probably measure the inputs with some accuracy, but not really the outcome of those activities that you've done. What has been the farmer adoption of the different practices that you did? What is the recall of the gender trainings that one has kind of done? And whether beyond the recall or beyond the adoption, has it actually translated into a increase in the yield or some change in household behavior in terms of gender, in terms of treatment of the, boy and girl child, or various other things. So it becomes a very complex process, and many times, as social activists, we kind of lay lesser importance to actually down the line impact, or it becomes very episodic or anecdotal and ad hoc. So these were some of the. Okay, yeah, I'll try to. So these were some of the issues. Now, we've tried to install a system which kind of using women from the community, as Gayatri also shared, and they're equipped with a smartphone or a tablet, and they collect data directly from rural communities, from going house to house, or sitting in a SHG meeting or in a cluster federation meeting and collecting data around various aspects of the theory of change. And there are around 1,300 such women who are not involved into any programmatic activities, but only involved into the data collection exercises. Um, so I'll just skip that. I mean, basically, in the dashboard, we've tried to bring in also pull data from secondary various public programs which is available in the public domain, as well as data collected by these women data collectors. And the data is kind of available at various levels. So right from a professional working responsible for a set of villages can actually see the change that is happening. Plus, of course, at the management unit level, the body which is responsible for strategic guidance or giving direction to the organization. Um, so these are some of the things. Some of these are things which are getting facilitated by data becoming available, for things like area identification for setting up a new team basis secondary data, identification of a new village, which village should I now prioritize to enter, area comparison against different development indicators, selection of a district. I won't go through all of these. I would probably like to. So these are some, sample screens which kind of tell you. So this tells you in a block which are the villages, where the concentration of priority vulnerable communities is higher. And it also tells you the lighter ones are villages where you haven't entered. And there again, so you can actually see the villages where you have entered and villages where you haven't. Selection of districts. So again, on different agriculture parameters, you can probably see, which will give you some idea of, selection of districts. And again, also comparing and benchmarking your performance. For example, you might have a NREGA program and you might be very happy that you're kind of, actually your work has kind of resulted in so many wage days being generated per job card. But is it a trend which is a secular trend, or is it something which has happened up, beyond what the government has kind of. So therefore also comparing with the NREGA data which is available in the public domain, and to see whether you've actually made a difference beyond that. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Madhu. I think that was really interesting, and I loved all of the use cases. I know you had a longer list, but I think that's really sort of what we want to be able to demonstrate through all of these cases, how it's not just for sort of reporting on outcomes, but how these are really practical use cases for an organization as they implement. So I'll move to Karthik right now. So Karthik from Pratham, he leads operations as part of the government partnership program, where he designs and strategizes critical program components on large-scale interventions, which are delivered in collaboration with state governments across India. And he also co-leads Pratham's measurement, monitoring, and evaluation team.
Great.
So over to
Thank
you.
you, Megha. Good morning to everyone. As Megha introduced me, my name is Karthik. I'm from Pratham, and many of you may know what Pratham does, but a very brief sentence. We try to improve basic literacy and numeracy at scale in India. We've been around for about 30 years, and today I'm going to talk about specifically one intervention which is addressing the challenge of basic literacy and numeracy in children who have been in school for some time but are still not at the level that they should be at, and how data can play a very significant role in actually understanding the problem and then potentially suggesting a solution that can be easily done at scale by the system. So for the past 15, 17 years, a lot of you probably know about the ASER survey that happens, that comes out every other year. It used to be annual, and which highlights the basic learning levels of children in ages 6 to 14. And one thing that we've seen as a trend, that there is universal enrollment. There's almost 98% children are already enrolled in school in this age bracket. But the question arises, are they really learning? And I'll take a very specific use case of just reading to say that, what the status is, what the trend is. So this is a simple ASER tool. Many of you perhaps have used it in your line of work or have seen it somewhere, where it's basically just trying to test if a child can read at different levels. And there are 4 levels to it, where, yeah, hopefully people can see it, but there's a standard 2-level text, which is something that any grade 2 level child should be able to read. There's a standard 1-level text, which is about 4 sentences. There are common words and common letters. In the survey itself, we test a child on this assessment to see what level they're at. And what we've seen year on year, and especially after the pandemic, that in grade 3 or in grade 5, there is still a very big gap. If you could see the bottom line chart, about 15 to 20% children in grade 3 currently can read this, and that's the curricular expectation right now. Children in grade 3 should be able to read a grade 2 level text after being in school for 2 years. If you see a line, and especially after the pandemic, this dropped even further. Now, if you see a grade 5 child, there are about 38% children, and this is after the pandemic, after 2 years of learning loss as well. About more than half the number of children in government schools are unable to read. Of course, there's variation from state to state. Now, this problem, Pratham and ASER, and we've continuously been talking about it, the government is cognizant of it, and a lot has actually been done. So, in the last 3 years, anyone who's working in the education sector knows that our new education policy was launched. They suggested a new curricular structure, where foundational stage, which is age 3 to 8, there was a lot of focus given to that. The NEP itself highlights the fact that if you don't fix foundational literacy numeracy, whatever else is written in the policy may not be relevant. Because of that, they even launched Nipun Bharat, which is our FLN mission. But the problem that comes in looking at the data is, what about children who are, and the targets that were set were for grade 3. So there's an expectation all children should be able to read by grade 3. But what about children who are not at that level, who have gone beyond grade 3? And that's where perhaps a solution based on data comes in. I'll give you an example of a simple school in northwest Karnataka, where we're looking at grade 4, and if you see this table, all the children are divided as per the levels that I had showed you earlier. And usually teaching is done by rows. There's a teacher who teaches grade 4, perhaps teaches grade 5, teaches the textbook, teaches the curriculum, but there is variation in learning levels. And this data is available to the teacher, but they still teach the curriculum. Why not take the same classroom and teach as per columns? Why don't you just club the children who are at a similar level after doing an assessment and make groups out of them and teach at their level, so that they're actually understanding what they're doing, and potentially then can use whatever textbook and text is there for their grade. This is what we call teaching at the right level. Very quickly, teaching at the right level starts at a teacher doing an assessment, understanding what level the child is at, grouping them as per their level and doing activities as a whole class specific to their group or individually. And then all the activities are tailored towards what a child can actually understand, be it in reading or in math. And then do another assessment, look at the data to actually understand if progress is happening or not. And eventually trying to reach the goal that all children can be able to read. Now, this methodology, it's not that Pratham just invented it and tries it out. It's also been rigorously evaluated. In the past 15, 20 years, 6 RCTs have been conducted, and that's where the organization as well as external researchers have actually collaborated, like with JPAL, where they've tried to understand what the problem is, what is the best way to find, to implement such an intervention. A lot of variations have been tried out, ranging from how can we do this with volunteers in the summer, how can we do it with school teachers, what type of support should be given, at what level, what type of mentoring and monitoring mechanism should be there. And it's all based on some evidence that has been generated from the school and 2 organizations collaboratively learning on what the best model can be. Now, on the basis of this, of course, this having validation from an external organization saying that this is a methodology that works, can get proven results, we can then collaborate at a larger scale. Pratham works directly, but the goal is to reach every child. And how can we do that? By partnering with state governments. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've partnered with the government of Karnataka, where we've been able to implement teaching at the right level through government school teachers and teaching them, telling them this methodology, the way to assess, the way to teach, the way to look at your data. And what we found is that in a 60-day period, teachers within the school calendar year are able to increase the percentage of children who can read a grade 2 level text by about 31 percentage points. And that's only 60 days. What if they just did this continuously for a period of time throughout the year? We'll hopefully, ASER data would change. Based on this, we've developed an entire intervention. We most recently, when it was done in Karnataka, it was in 2021-22. We reached about 900,000 children, reaching all the schools. The program is quite lean. There is a baseline, midline, and endline. Teachers are trained on this methodology. They teach it for 45 minutes per subject. And children are actually grouped by level rather than grade for that time period. There's an entire mentoring and monitoring mechanism that is put in place so that there is continuous support. This is something that Pratham actually learned through the RCTs, where they actually tested out what are the mechanisms that enable a teacher to deliver teaching at the right level well, and one of them was having a mentoring cadre coming in and observing, demonstrating, and giving them feedback. So in conclusion, I know this is a very specific data session, but this has just been a very specific use case of how we can look at data, identify what is a potential gap, understand the larger policy landscape, have a solution validated by perhaps an external organization, and collaborate with them to actually refine the solution, and eventually then take it to scale with governments across India. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karthik. And I think again, it's been really nice. I think everybody's had different sort of perspectives and use cases, and I think like in terms of Pratham's journey, I think just the fact that it's not been just identification of the problem for the organization, but at a national scale in terms of really bringing it out there, in terms of advocating for low learning outcomes, and of course I think in terms of some of the rigorous impact evaluations that have been done with Pratham, I think seeing them not just as validation exercises, which of course is very important, but really this long journey of iterating and plumbing and really coming up with models that work and are scalable. I think that's been really interesting. And finally, I'll hand it over to Hitesh. Hitesh is a senior lead at Indus Action, where he works on problem-solving system issues in the delivery of social security net by governments. Over to you, Hitesh. And after Hitesh, we just so that everybody knows, we'll have around 5-10 minutes for audience Q&A. So please be ready for that. Thanks.
Thanks, Megha. Hi, everyone. Thanks to ISDM for the invitation. I'm Hitesh. I represent Indus Action. Indus Action is a policy implementation organization. We work with different state governments to implement social welfare schemes at scale. We work across the country, states like Tamil Nadu, Haryana, Punjab, Delhi, etc. Today, I'm going to talk about Indus Action's template of how we approach systems change in collaboration with governments. I'll be sharing a template, and also I'll be sharing illustrating the point through a case study of our implementation of Building and Construction Workers Act with Labour Department in Delhi. So I'll briefly share with you all how we try to see. How do you? Thanks. Yeah, thank you. The approach to systems change in this case is it basically starts from scratch, as Gayathri ma'am also previously mentioned, that there are some standard challenges which we see citizens facing in accessing schemes across the country. For instance, documentation, application-related challenges and awareness-related challenges. But what we have seen over the past 10 years of our existence is that apart from these standard challenges, we often notice that there are contextual challenges which citizens face based on the basis of geography within states, across states, and across schemes and departments as well. So one of the first things that we try to do when we start working on a problem is to diagnose it. We work with citizens, we work with frontline bureaucrats, senior bureaucrats, non-profits working on that specific scheme. The objective is to understand, the flow of citizen journey from the point of awareness till the point of, accessing the benefit promised by the scheme. And once we arrive at a diagnosis, we closely co-create the solution with the stakeholders involved in the system. That includes, people who are key decision makers, along with people who are interacting with citizens in implementing it. Uh, Apart from that, one of the key sort of experiences that we have had about accessing this data, capturing data, and preparing this data is to how to translate the information provided by the data to the audience. And in this case, the audience is the senior bureaucrat. Mostly in the cases, who have attention span of the kind of work that they have. They logistically they have attention span of 5 to 10 minutes. So how do we communicate this data to them? I think post synthesis that becomes a major task. Communicating solutions to even frontline bureaucrats who have been, working in their default setting for many years. So I think ultimately the communication of what the data says becomes important. We often joke that we are in the business of translation of details to sentences and to ideas. So I think mostly that eventually becomes the journey from capturing data to ensuring that the citizens are able to benefit from the whole exercise. Um, uh, After this, I think it becomes a cyclical process of iteration. We closely work with multiple state governments in starting helplines for the departments, and that becomes a source of iteration for us. It's not just to address citizen grievances, but also to make process and policy changes that we have been co-creating with the stakeholders. Um, yeah. So what I wanted to share here is the example of Building and Construction Workers Act that we have worked on in Delhi. In 2020, we started working on the legislation. The objective was to ensure that the construction workers in Delhi who were migrating out of the city once the lockdown happened, how do we ensure that they have access to social security benefits in Delhi? And Building and Construction Workers Act was one of the vehicles to do that. The calculation at that moment was that there are around 10 lakh construction workers in Delhi, and then in that moment, the government found out that around 50 to 60,000 workers were registered. So there was a big gap, on how to deliver these benefits, and that's when we started in the middle of pandemic in 2020 to work on the problem. As I shared, we started in the same process. We diagnosed the problem. We understood that there were challenges in technology. The form was taking around 60 minutes to fill. The SOPs of multiple schemes within the Act were not completely established. So in Building and Construction Workers Act, there are 17 schemes. So it's a bouquet of benefits for a construction worker. And there are, of course, top 5, 6 schemes which the workers aspire to, access. However, that was becoming a challenge for them. So that was a key diagnosis that the frontline portals, both digital and physical portals, that interaction process has to be straightened out, and that required us working on the capacity building of frontline bureaucrats and ensuring that the citizen experience is improved. So in this case, our focus seamlessly was focused on citizen experience. We got down to break down how citizen experience can be understood in form of metrics. For instance, how much time does it take for a citizen to close a form? How much time for a citizen does it take, to arrive at login? The cost of the application. For instance, they would take around 5 days to close a transaction, which included foregoing wages, going to cyber cafes, going to unions. So all that eventually became the administrative burden faced by the citizen. So this was the case that we made to the state that ultimately the objective that the state has, which is to transfer 5,000 rupees COVID DBT to citizens, is not getting met because citizens are anyway spending 2,000 to 2,500 rupees anyways in the process of transaction. So the treatment ultimately would not eventually work out. Therefore, I think our attempt was to, so basically then the attempt becomes to uncover these, latent blockers faced by citizens and frontline senior officials and senior officials. So I think the approach is always holistic for us. The data and the system always talk to each other for us. And what you see right now here is the funnel of the citizen journey that was happening in 2020. But you see this funnel is constantly narrowing down to the end, where what you see in the extreme right is successful welfare delivery, which wasn't happening in that moment. And this is the point where we started from. Uh, Yeah. I'll briefly also talk about what goes into, executing this collection of data, training of frontline officials, training of, our own team members as well, in looking at the problem in a way which inspires, curiosity. Uh, so some of the things that we already had access to were the secondary data, legislations, notifications issued by the department. But what we went about is talking to, we talk to nonprofits a lot who are working on the field, organizations such as uh, uh, Pradhan working in different states, organizations such as CFAR, and also Jan Sahas, who have had a long history of working on these problems. Uh, we organize these micro quantitative and qualitative studies to have the evidence ready for the subsequent recommendations that we're going to make to the state. Um, we also utilize aggregate data sets provided by the government to have a more informed perspective on the problem. So all in all, along with our targeted telephonic surveys and the helplines that the state run, we ensure that all these sources of information are integrated in a in a crisp one pager where the decision maker is able to consume the problem and also arrive at a understanding of the decision for the solution as well. Uh, Yeah. So some of the benefits that we get by being part of this process is that of course our working with the state improves, but it also improves the way the team gets organized. The kind of systems and templates that we formulate for implementation. We have SOPs of field study. We have SOPs of application camps. We have SOPs for executing communication exercises for the data that has been collected. So therefore, tech and data hygiene has been a top sort of line for us, ensuring that frontline officials are trained in collecting data, which is aimed at not just solving the problem for the citizen at that moment, which is of course the primary motivation for everyone, but at the same time. Ensuring that they also see the problem from a systems perspective. So this has been a journey for us to groom team members and frontline officials to ensure that they also not just focus on the immediate resolution of the problem, but also see the field as part of the system. Lastly, I want to share that this illustration of the example of that we work has ultimately given us few success stories as well. As you see in Building and Construction Worker Act, by 2022, we had 9 lakh workers registered in the system. As of now, the website is live, which we started working on. The 40 minutes time for registration has reduced to 25 minutes now. And these are small successes. I'm not saying this has completely solved the problem. Being part of systems change work through data requires working on these small levers, and once we see the parts working out, then ultimately some also works out in our experience. So hopefully I'll be sharing another presentation with you all when we see the sum also work out in the Building and Construction Workers Act in Delhi. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hitesh. And thanks, I think, a lot for highlighting the importance of like communication and visualization. We might have a lot of good data points that we want to show, but I think if it's not able to get the policymakers or the right people's attention, that can be a big constraint. I'm going to penalize myself for being very generous with my timekeeping and not ask any questions and hand it over to the audience for a few questions. How much time can we take? 5 minutes? Okay. So maybe we can just have three questions if people can raise their hands, and also very quickly introduce yourself, keep it to one question, and if you're posing it to somebody in particular, do mention that. Let people just, because I wasn't getting those, I think just,
Uh,
yeah.
Hello, hi. My name is Shubham. I have question for you, Gayatri. So you mentioned that various ministries or departments approach you with data, right, and then ask, can you deliver the services? So how do you do the sanity check for those data? Like, right, like, I mean, how do you know that whether that data is correct, or how do you do that?
Were you saying that we should take all the questions or should I answer?
Hi, I'm Gauri. The question is actually around internal organization planning, Hitesh, that you spoke about, but it'll be good to hear thoughts from all of you that internally, for data to be used for decision making, multiple teams have to use data. And how do you drive adoption of data systems internally? Why would a person on field really feel like, this data will actually help me and actually use data systems? So some thoughts on that will be great. Thank you.
I'm Kuldeep from Bragg, Bangladesh. Um, One question I have for for everyone essentially, maybe not for Pratham, but once the problem of operationalization of the schemes are resolved, what is the next step for you? Because once you solve the discoverability issue, and you've automated that discoverability, and then once there are systems laid out where people don't even need to go and ask, and things come into their accounts or their Aadhaar card or those kind of systems that you use in India, what's next for you as organizations?
I'll take the first one because that was addressed to me. Yeah. So the question was on when we get data, how do we validate it and sanitize the data to use it? Actually, as the head of delivery at Hakdarshaik, I panic when the project is a data-driven project. What we call as a data-driven project, because I know the data is going to be bad, right? And if you leave it to me, I do a much better job of going and delivering it on the ground rather than somebody coming and telling me use only this data set to deliver, right? So it is a big problem because today quality of data is not good. That's a big challenge. Two-prong approach to cleaning up that data. One is feet on the street. The other is we have our own sort of calling system. We'll have to call up, validate it, then give it to the ground teams to go and sort of use it to actually do the linkages. But it's a big problem, not solved for. We are getting there with all these family IDs and all coming up, but right now it's panic for me if it's a data driven project. Just one point on the last question, which was around what happens when we automatically discover. And I think the next step is to ensure the most needy get it, right? To be able to do policy level intervention and advocacy to ensure, because we don't have infinite resources, right? Resources are finite when it comes to schemes. So can we then move to channelizing the funds and the budgets to the most needy using data? That to me is the next step, but I'll let the others also answer.
Just on the internal capacity question, at least at Pratham, we've seen it in two ways. One, we have a very large M&E team. It's called MME actually. And unlike, I think, in a lot of other organizations where it's a set of people at the national level who are perhaps have a PhD in data science or something, here where it is strong and there are people on the ground who also understand data. And the important part is all our interventions are designed in a way that everyone should be able to understand the data and potentially then take some decision on it. Like what I showed for teaching at the right level, assessment data is plugged into the intervention itself. So if you can design interventions where people can understand how to use it, then I think uptake is more, and of course have someone to kind of guide. But a lot of times we've seen, especially working with the government, that data is just meant for reporting, and the why behind it is not really explained to the last person.
Just adding to what Karthik said, I think for us, it's also about the culture within the organization. I think getting platforms developed and it being used by the frontline and within the organization is slightly easier than building the culture of curiosity, critical thinking, and asking people to look at the problem in a certain way. I think that's a hurdle which we have found slightly more complex to go over. I think what we have seen is that once you go over that hurdle, then most of these challenges actually get addressed, and the whole organization, in fact, we try to build that culture within the whole organization, not just in the M&A or tech team, but from the frontline official to person who is making decisions. We try to go to the field, do it by showing and sort of build that culture by doing within the organization. So I think that is something which we have seen a lot of success within the organization. And to answer your question, I think it's a cycle. You have to work on sustainability of interventions with departments who are implementing that scheme. There are sustainability metrics that we work on, which we continue to support the departments with, even after we transition out of the partnership. But yeah, there are systems that we have built for it. But yeah, we can have this conversation later since we're short on time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. There are a lot of really good questions that came. I don't know if we can find a way to answer these through another mechanism, but really good questions. I saw a lot of questions on data privacy, and as part of the data and evidence track, you would have seen that there are going to be sessions on that. So I would urge you to join those. And I think we are already 5-10 minutes late, so I will hand it back to ISDM. Thank you so much, everyone, and thanks for the panelists as well.